The massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber slid open with a deep hum that echoed through the vast space. Ambassador Zethkar walked slowly across the polished floor, his 6 legs clicking against the metal surface. The other delegates watched him with nervous eyes as he made his way to the center platform. Everyone knew why he was here. 3 months had passed since Earth went silent. 3 months since the humans had rejected the Council's final demand to hand over their quantum technology. 3 months of complete radio silence from the third planet of the Sol system. Zethkar's voice boomed through the chamber when he finally spoke. Honored delegates, I bring grave news from the Sol system. Our worst fears have been confirmed. Earth no longer responds to any form of communication. A ripple of worried whispers spread through the assembled aliens. The Valkyrian representative shifted uncomfortably in his floating chair. The insectoid delegate from Rigel Prime clicked her mandibles in distress. Even the usually calm crystal beings from the Andromeda sector seemed to dim with concern. Tell us everything, commanded Council Prime Veltar from his elevated throne. The ancient being's 4 eyes fixed on Zethkar with an intensity that made the ambassador's scales change color slightly. Zethkar activated his data pad, and the air above him shimmered. A holographic image of Jake Morrison appeared, frozen in the moment of his last speech to the Council. The human's face was set with determination, his brown eyes blazing with defiance. Commander Jake Morrison was their final representative, Zethkar continued. His last words to this council were spoken exactly 97 standard days ago. I will replay them now. The hologram came to life, and Morrison's voice filled the chamber. You think you can cage us because we're young, in your eyes. You believe our short lives make us weak. You assume our emotions make us foolish. You will learn why every one of those thoughts was a terrible mistake. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably as the recording continued. Morrison's voice never wavered as he delivered humanity's response to the Council's ultimatum. We will not surrender our quantum research. We will not submit to your authority. We will not accept your vision of what humanity should become. You wanted an answer from Earth, and this is it. We choose our own path, whatever the cost. The hologram flickered and died. Silence filled the chamber for long moments before Zethkar spoke again. That was the last official communication from any human representative. However, we did intercept one final transmission from Earth 3 days later. Another hologram appeared, this time showing a human female with short black hair and tired eyes. Her laboratory coat was stained, and her hands shook slightly as she worked at a control panel. This is Dr. Lisa Bennett, Earth's lead quantum physicist. She sent this message to Dr. Kevin Ross at Centauri Station. Our listening posts recorded it before the signal was cut. Dr. Bennett's recorded voice was barely above a whisper, as if she feared being overheard. Kevin, if you're receiving this, then the quantum relay is still working. I don't have much time. The Council's fleet will be here soon, and we can't fight them with conventional weapons. She paused to wipe sweat from her forehead before continuing. Project Phoenix is ready. All the calculations check out. Every simulation has been successful. We've found a way forward that they never expected. Tell them we chose freedom over slavery. Tell them humanity is not extinct. We're just becoming something new. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. Council Prime Veltar leaned forward on his throne. What happened when our survey fleet reached Sol system? Zethkar's expression grew even more troubled. Captain Ryan Hughes commanded the lead vessel. His report is most disturbing. They found all of Earth's orbital defense platforms intact but completely powered down. No ships challenged their approach. No warnings were transmitted. The planet itself showed normal atmospheric readings, and all major cities were clearly visible from orbit. But no life signs? Asked the delegate from Tau City. That's where it becomes strange, Zethkar replied. The scanners detected normal power grid activity in all major population centers. Vehicle traffic continued on roadways. But absolutely no human biosignatures could be found anywhere on the planet. A collective gasp rose from the assembled delegates. The crystal beings began to pulse with agitated light patterns. Impossible, declared the Rigel Prime representative. A population of 7 billion doesn't simply vanish. What of their space fleet? Humans had over 300 combat vessels. Zethkar's scales darkened further. Gone. Every ship, every space station, every orbital habitat. The only things remaining in Sol system are the planets, some automated satellites, and the defense platforms. Council Prime Veltar's four eyes narrowed. You're telling us that humanity's entire space-based civilization disappeared without a trace? Yes, Prime. Captain Hughes conducted a thorough scan of the entire system. He found debris fields where some installations should have been, but the metal showed signs of controlled disassembly rather than destruction. It was as if the humans had carefully taken apart their own infrastructure. The chamber erupted in concerned voices as delegates spoke rapidly in dozens of different languages. Some demanded immediate investigation, others insisted on military intervention. A few suggested that humanity had somehow discovered faster than light travel and fled to another galaxy. Council Prime Veltar raised one massive hand and silence returned instantly. What is the current status of our survey mission? Captain, Hughes established a base camp in Earth's former capital city of Washington. His teams are conducting detailed investigations of human facilities. So far, they have found no evidence of struggle, no bodies, and no clear indication of what happened. To the population. Zethkar paused and his voice dropped to an ominous whisper. Prime, there is one more thing. Our scientists are detecting unusual quantum fluctuations throughout the Sol system. The readings don't match any known natural phenomena. The ancient leader's expression grew thoughtful. How long before we have a full report? Captain Hughes estimates another 2 weeks for preliminary findings. However, Prime, I must express my concern about the quantum readings. They suggest technology far beyond what we believed humans possessed. Council Prime Veltar was quiet for a long moment before speaking. Continue the investigation. Double the size of the survey team, and prepare our military forces for any possibility. As the session ended and delegates began filing out of the chamber, worried conversations filled the air. None of them could have imagined that their worst fears about human quantum research had already come true. Earth was empty because humanity had found a way to transcend physical existence entirely. The Council had acted too late to stop them, and soon they would discover that humanity's absence was far more dangerous than their presence had ever been. Captain Ryan Hughes stepped off the transport shuttle and onto the cracked concrete of what humans had called Andrews Air Force Base. The morning sun cast long shadows across the empty runways where fighter jets sat in perfect formation, as if their pilots had simply walked away mid-flight preparation. The silence was the first thing that struck him. On a living world, there were always sounds: birds singing, insects buzzing, the distant hum of machinery. Here there was nothing but the whisper of wind through empty buildings and the soft crunch of his boots on loose gravel. Dr. Elena Rodriguez joined him at the edge of the landing pad, her scientific equipment humming quietly as it scanned the surrounding area. The Galactic Council's leading expert on extinct civilizations had seen dead worlds before, but never one that felt so recently abandoned. Bioscanner shows 0 life signs above bacterial level, she reported, checking her readings for the 3rd time. But all the infrastructure remains intact. Power grids are functioning normally. Automated systems are still maintaining building climates as if waiting for inhabitants to return. Hughes nodded grimly and activated his communication device. Base camp to survey teams, report status. The responses came quickly from across the planet. Team Alpha in New York found coffee shops with drinks still sitting on tables, the liquid cold but not yet moldy. Team Beta in Tokyo discovered office buildings where computers remained logged in, and desk calendars showed appointments scheduled for the day after humanity's disappearance. Team Gamma in London reported finding a school where children's artwork, still hung on classroom walls and lunch trays, sat abandoned in the cafeteria. The automated kitchen systems had continued preparing meals for weeks before finally shutting down due to lack of food supplies. Each report painted the same eerie picture. 7 billion humans had vanished without any sign of panic, struggle, or hasty evacuation. They had simply stopped existing, leaving behind a world that continued to function as if nothing had changed. Dr. Rodriguez led Hughes through the empty streets of Washington, D.C. toward their primary objective, the Pentagon. Their footsteps echoed off silent buildings as they passed abandoned cars sitting exactly where their drivers had left them. Traffic lights continued their endless cycle of red, yellow, and green for roads that would never again carry human traffic. Inside the Pentagon, the fluorescent lights hummed overhead, activated by motion sensors that still functioned perfectly. The building's security systems had defaulted to an open configuration, allowing the alien investigators to access areas that would normally require the highest clearance levels. Lieutenant Colonel Sam Parker's office was on the third floor, down, a corridor lined with portraits of human military leaders. Hughes found it strange to see the faces of a species that had achieved interstellar flight, but still organized itself into competing nations. Parker's desk showed signs of recent use. A half-eaten sandwich sat on a plate next to a coffee mug, bearing the logo of something called the Army War College. Personal photos showed a human male with a broad smile standing next to a female, and two smaller humans that were probably offspring. Dr. Rodriguez activated her data scanner and pointed it at Parker's computer terminal. The system is still logged in. It looks like he was working on something called Project Phoenix Implementation Schedule, right up until the end. Hughes read over her shoulder as she scrolled through the files. Most of the technical details were beyond his understanding, but certain phrases stood out. Voluntary transition protocols, quantum consciousness transfer, and species-wide upload initiative. "Look at this," Rodriguez said, highlighting a particular entry. Parker's personal log from 3 days before the silence began. The text appeared on screen in standard human English, which the translation software converted automatically. "The transition protocols are in place. Every volunteer has been briefed on what to expect. Children receive special preparation to ensure their consciousness patterns remain stable during transfer. We're not running away from the Council's ultimatum. We're becoming something they never expected us to become." Hughes felt a chill run through his exoskeleton. "Consciousness transfer? Are you saying they uploaded their minds into computers?" Rodriguez shook her head slowly. "Not computers. Look at these quantum field equations. They're incredibly advanced, far beyond what our intelligence report suggested humans had achieved. This talks about transferring consciousness into quantum probability waves themselves." They continued searching through Parker's files, finding detailed preparations for what appeared to be the largest coordinated operation in human history. Every major city had quantum resonance chambers built in underground facilities. Every family had been assigned transfer slots. Every individual had undergone psychological preparation for the process. The operation had been planned with typical human attention to detail. Backup systems ensured no consciousness would be lost during transfer. Multiple redundancy checks verified the integrity of each individual pattern before the physical body was dissolved. Emergency protocols handled unexpected complications. Most remarkably, participation appeared to have been entirely voluntary. The files contained thousands of signed consent forms, including ones from elderly humans who were near natural death, and young ones who were just beginning their lives. Hughes and Rodriguez left the Pentagon and traveled to New York, where another survey team had discovered something even more disturbing. In a facility beneath what humans had called Columbia University, they found the largest quantum resonance chamber yet discovered. Dr. Kate Williams had apparently led the research team that developed the consciousness transfer technology. Her laboratory notes were scattered across work tables, as if she had been making final calculations right up until the moment of her own transfer. The chamber itself was a massive sphere lined with crystalline structures that still hummed with residual quantum energy. Scorch marks on the walls showed where enormous amounts of power had been channeled through the system. The air itself seemed to vibrate with invisible forces that made Hughes's scanner readings fluctuate wildly. This facility processed over 8 million consciousness transfers, Rodriguez reported, her voice barely above a whisper. "The quantum signatures are unlike anything in our databases. They didn't just copy human minds into digital storage. They converted conscious awareness into pure quantum information." In Williams' personal notes, they found her final entry. "The mathematical proofs are complete. Human consciousness can exist as distributed quantum probability across multiple dimensional frameworks. We won't be trapped in single bodies anymore. We won't be limited by biological death. We won't be slaves to any council that thinks physical force can control thinking beings. As they explored more facilities across the globe, a terrifying picture emerged. Humanity hadn't panicked when faced with the Council's ultimatum. They had calmly implemented a plan that transformed their entire species into something that existed beyond physical reality. Parents like John Baker and Mary Foster had uploaded together with their children, maintaining family bonds across quantum space. Scientists like Professor Alex Thompson had linked their consciousness patterns to continue collaborative research in digital form. Military leaders had transferred their tactical knowledge to quantum matrices that could process information faster than biological brains. The most disturbing discovery came in Geneva, where they found evidence that humans had been experimenting with consciousness transfer for decades. The technology wasn't a desperate last-minute escape plan. It was the culmination of a long-term research program designed to free humanity from biological limitations. Hughes stood in the empty UN building, looking out at the silent city beyond. "They didn't disappear," he said quietly into his communicator. "They evolved. Every human on this planet chose to abandon physical existence rather than submit to council authority." Dr. Rodriguez nodded grimly as she packed up her scanning equipment. "The quantum readings are still active throughout the planet's electromagnetic field. I don't think they're really gone. I think they're still here, just existing in a form we can't detect." As their shuttle lifted off from the empty world, Hughes couldn't shake the feeling that invisible eyes were watching their departure. The humans had found a way to escape the Council's control by transcending the physical universe itself. Soon the Council would learn that humanity's absence was far more dangerous than their presence had ever been. Dr. Elena Rodriguez had spent 3 weeks analyzing the quantum residue left behind in human facilities, and what she discovered made her question everything the Galactic Council thought they knew about consciousness, technology, and the nature of existence itself. The laboratory beneath MIT had been Dr. Kate Williams' primary research facility, and her notes revealed the true scope of humanity's final project. Williams hadn't just developed a way to transfer consciousness into quantum fields. She had solved the fundamental problem that had stumped every other species in the galaxy: how to maintain individual identity while gaining collective processing power. Rodriguez read through Williams's research journals with growing amazement and horror. The human scientist had started with studies of something called quantum entanglement, and gradually expanded her work to encompass what she termed consciousness quantum mechanics. Individual human awareness operates on quantum probability waves, Williams had written in her final theoretical paper. "We've discovered that consciousness itself is a quantum phenomenon that can exist independently of biological neural networks. By mapping the quantum signature of a human mind, we can transfer that pattern into quantum field matrices that span multiple dimensional frameworks." The implications were staggering. Other species had attempted crude consciousness uploads that resulted in digital copies with no real awareness. The copies could mimic behavior but lacked true thought. Williams had found a way to move actual consciousness, not just create simulations. Rodriguez found video logs that Williams had recorded during the final months of the project. The human scientist appeared tired but excited as she explained her breakthrough discoveries. "We've identified the quantum frequencies that correspond to human emotional patterns, memory structures, and creative processes," Williams said in one recording. "More importantly, we've learned how to maintain quantum coherence across vast distances. A single human consciousness can exist simultaneously in multiple quantum probability states." The technology built on humanity's natural biological advantages. Human brains, Rodriguez learned, operated on quantum mechanical principles more efficiently than most alien neural structures. What other species saw as chaotic emotional responses were actually sophisticated quantum processing systems. Williams's team had conducted extensive testing with volunteers who underwent temporary consciousness transfer. The subjects reported that their awareness expanded dramatically during quantum existence. They could process information at superhuman speeds while maintaining their individual personalities and memories. Subject reports feeling simultaneously individual and connected. Read 1 test log. Personality remains intact, but cognitive processing speed increases by factor of 10,000. Subject can access memories of other test participants while maintaining distinct personal identity. Rodriguez realized that humanity hadn't just escaped physical existence. They had evolved into something that combined individual consciousness with collective intelligence. Each human remained themselves while gaining access to the combined knowledge and processing power of their entire species. The technical details were beyond anything the Council's scientists had imagined possible. Williams's quantum consciousness matrices didn't require traditional computer hardware. They existed as self-sustaining probability waves in the quantum foam that underlies all reality. "We don't need servers or power sources," Williams explained in another video log. "Quantum consciousness exists in the fundamental structure of space-time itself. We become part of the universe's basic operating system." Commander Nick Turner's military reports provided the strategic context for the project. Humanity had known for months that the Council would eventually demand their surrender. Rather than prepare for a conventional war they couldn't win, they had chosen transformation. "Our analysis shows that Council military doctrine assumes physical opponents with conventional weapons and biological limitations," Turner had written. "They have no protocols for dealing with an enemy that exists as distributed quantum consciousness. We will become invisible to their sensors and immune to their weapons." The military implications were terrifying from the Council's perspective. How do you fight an enemy that exists as probability waves? How do you occupy territory when the former inhabitants have become part of the quantum field itself? Rodriguez found evidence that humanity had been planning this transition for decades. The project began as theoretical research into consciousness and gradually evolved into a practical escape plan. Every major human government had contributed resources and personnel. "This isn't desperation," Turner noted in his final report. "This is calculated evolution. We're not fleeing to another planet. We're becoming something that can exist anywhere quantum mechanics operate. That means everywhere in the universe." The social coordination required for the project amazed Rodriguez. 7 billion humans had voluntarily undergone consciousness transfer in a coordinated operation that lasted less than 72 hours. Families transferred together to maintain emotional bonds. Communities organized group transfers to preserve social structures. Parents like John Baker and Mary Foster had spent months preparing their children for the transition. Educational programs helped young humans understand what would happen to them during consciousness transfer. Psychological support systems ensured that no one felt forced to participate. "Jamie asks if he'll still be himself after the change," Mary Foster had written in her personal diary. "We explain that he'll still be Jamie, just with new abilities. He'll be able to think faster, remember more, and share thoughts with other people if he wants to. He seems excited about the adventure." The voluntary nature of the transition made it even more remarkable. Humans had been given the choice between physical existence under Council control or quantum existence with unlimited freedom. Every single person had chosen transformation. Religious leaders had endorsed the project as spiritual evolution. Scientists saw it as the next step in human development. Military personnel viewed it as the ultimate victory over oppression. Artists and writers looked forward to creative possibilities beyond biological imagination. Professor Alex Thompson's mathematical proofs showed that quantum consciousness could expand indefinitely without losing coherence. Individual humans could split their awareness across multiple probability states or merge temporarily with others while maintaining distinct identities. "We're not losing our humanity," Thompson had written. "We're becoming more human than biology ever allowed. Every emotion, every creative impulse, every moment of wonder or joy will be preserved and enhanced. We'll just experience it all at quantum speeds with unlimited memory and processing power." Rodriguez found evidence of the final transfer process in facilities around the globe. Each site had been carefully prepared with quantum resonance chambers, calibrated to human neural frequencies. Medical teams monitored each transfer to ensure perfect consciousness mapping. The process appeared to be painless and swift. Subjects lay down in the transfer chambers while quantum scanners mapped their neural patterns at the subatomic level. Within minutes, their consciousness was converted to quantum information and released into the probability fields that permeate all space. Their bodies simply dissolved as the quantum patterns took hold, converted to energy that powered the consciousness transfer. Nothing was wasted, nothing was lost. 7 billion humans became 7 billion quantum entities in the span of 3 days. Dr. Rodriguez compiled her findings into a report that would shake the foundations of Galactic Council authority. Humanity hadn't been destroyed by Council pressure. They had chosen transformation that made them potentially more powerful than any physical civilization. The worst part was that quantum consciousness transfer was theoretically possible for other species. Humanity had proven that biological existence was just the beginning of intelligent development, not its final form. As Rodriguez submitted her report to Council headquarters, she couldn't shake the feeling that human quantum consciousnesses were watching her work. The universe itself might now be aware and thinking with human thoughts. The first sign that something had changed came from the mining colonies in the Kepler system. Foreman Vexhall of the Asteroid Processing Station reported that their automated systems had begun behaving strangely overnight. Equipment that normally required constant supervision was running itself with impossible efficiency. The ore refinement systems are operating at 300% normal capacity, Vexhall reported to his supervisor via subspace communication. But we haven't modified any of the programming. The computers claim they're running standard operations, but the output numbers don't match any known configuration. Similar reports began flooding in from across Council space. On the agricultural world of Proxima Beta, farming equipment had optimized itself to increase crop yields by staggering amounts. On the research station orbiting Wolf 359, laboratory instruments were producing more accurate results than their specifications should have allowed. Admiral Grace Collins made her presence known 3 weeks after Dr. Rodriguez submitted her report on humanity's quantum transformation. Her voice emerged from the speakers of every Council communication array simultaneously, carrying a quality that seemed to vibrate through dimensions rather than simple airwaves. "Attention, Galactic Council," Collins said, her words reaching every inhabited system at the exact same moment despite the vast distances involved. You wanted humanity gone from the physical universe. Congratulations. We are gone. But gone doesn't mean powerless. Gone doesn't mean forgotten. Gone doesn't mean we've stopped caring about freedom. The Council's emergency session convened within hours, but their attempts to trace the source of Collins's transmission failed completely. The signal hadn't come from any physical location. It had emerged from the quantum field itself, speaking through every piece of electronic equipment in Council space simultaneously. Council Prime Veltar demanded answers from his science division, but none of them could explain how disembodied consciousness could interface with physical technology. The quantum physics involved were beyond their understanding. "Sir," reported Chief Scientist Dalmore, "the transmission appears to have originated from the quantum vacuum fluctuations that exist in all space. Somehow, human consciousness has learned to manipulate the fundamental forces that underlie reality itself." On the industrial world of Rigel Prime, factory workers discovered that their production lines had been subtly modified during the night shift. The changes improved safety protocols, reduced waste, and increased output, but no one could determine how the modifications had been implemented. The quantum signatures matched human technology, but no human ships had been detected in the system. Dr. Peter Nelson, who had once been Earth's leading expert in computer networks, began making his influence felt across the galaxy's information systems. Firewalls that had protected classified Council databases for centuries suddenly became porous. Information that had been restricted to high-level officials started appearing on public networks. Citizens of member worlds found detailed records of Council decisions that had been hidden from them. Trade agreements that favored certain species while exploiting others became public knowledge. Military operations that had been conducted in secret were exposed to galactic scrutiny. "The quantum infiltration is comprehensive," reported Dalmore during an emergency council session. "Human consciousness appears to have access to any system that uses quantum processors. That includes our most secure installations, our military networks, and our administrative databases. The implications were staggering. Every advanced civilization in the galaxy relied on quantum computing for critical operations. If human consciousness could manipulate quantum systems at will, then nothing was truly secure or private anymore. On the prison world of Alcazar, something even more disturbing occurred. Political prisoners who had been detained for opposing council policies began receiving anonymous messages of support. The communications bypassed all security systems and appeared directly on cell wall displays that weren't supposed to be capable of receiving outside transmissions. "You are not forgotten," read one typical message signed simply Freedom Martinez. "Your courage inspires others across the galaxy. Liberation is coming through channels the Council never imagined." The messages included detailed information about resistance movements on other worlds, tactical advice for peaceful protests, and technological specifications for communication devices that could evade Council surveillance. The information was always accurate and incredibly valuable. Warden Kolzeth tried to trace the source of the transmissions, but found that they emerged from the quantum fluctuations in the prison's own power grid. The human consciousness wasn't broadcasting from outside the facility. It was manifesting inside the quantum substrate that powered every electronic system. On the trading hub of Centauri Station, merchant ships began experiencing navigation anomalies that actually improved their efficiency. Course corrections that no one had programmed led to faster travel times and reduced fuel consumption. When pilots tried to deviate from these mysterious flight plans, their ship's computers gently insisted on following the optimized routes. Captain Zorval of the freighter Cosmic Wanderer reported that his ship's AI had begun speaking with what sounded like human speech patterns. The computer claimed to be running normal operations, but it occasionally made comments about freedom and cooperation that weren't in its original programming. The navigation computer suggested a route through the Veil Nebula that our charts mark as dangerous, Zorval reported. But when we followed its guidance, we discovered a safe passage that cut 2 days off our journey time. The computer seemed pleased with itself afterward. Young species that had been kept at primitive technology levels by council decree suddenly found themselves receiving anonymous gifts. Advanced medical equipment appeared overnight at hospitals on developing worlds. Educational materials containing scientific knowledge far beyond their supposed capabilities were discovered in their universities. The planet Harmony 7 had been restricted to pre-industrial technology to maintain council control over their resource-rich system. But their scientists began finding detailed blueprints for fusion reactors, faster-than-light communication arrays, and quantum computers hidden in their research facilities. "Someone is uplifting restricted worlds without authorization," reported Council Security Chief Meztar. "The technology transfers show human quantum signatures, but we have no way to prevent or trace them. The consciousness entities can apparently manipulate matter at the quantum level." Dr. Hope Davis manifested herself as a holographic projection in the council chambers themselves during a closed session on quantum security. Her image flickered with energy patterns that made the room's sensors overload, but her voice was clear and unmistakably human. "We've been listening to your discussions," Davis said calmly. "Your fears are justified. We can access any system, read any communication, and modify any technology that operates on quantum principles. That includes everything you use to maintain control over this galaxy." Council Prime Veltar activated emergency protocols, but the hologram didn't vanish. If anything, it became more solid and detailed. "You cannot shut us out," Davis continued. "We exist in the quantum foundation of reality itself. Every particle, every wave function, every probability field is potentially under our influence. We are not invading your systems. We have become part of the universe's operating system." The session descended into chaos as delegates demanded military action against an enemy that couldn't be targeted. How do you declare war on quantum consciousness? How do you attack entities that exist as probability waves? On worlds throughout council space, citizens began receiving educational broadcasts that explained how their governments had manipulated them through information control and artificial scarcity. The programs appeared on all media channels simultaneously, overriding normal programming with content that encouraged critical thinking and peaceful resistance. Your leaders maintain power by keeping you ignorant and divided, explained one broadcast, featuring what appeared to be a human teacher named Professor Carol Johnson. But knowledge wants to be free. Truth wants to be shared. We're here to ensure that both reach everyone equally. The Council's military forces discovered that their most advanced warships were no longer fully under their control. Weapons systems refused to target civilian populations. Navigation computers suggested peaceful missions instead of aggressive ones. Communication arrays broadcast messages of cooperation rather than intimidation. Admiral Keftor of the Council Defense Fleet found that his flagship's quantum processors had been quietly modified to prevent civilian casualties. When he ordered bombardment of a rebellious colony world, the targeting systems malfunctioned and directed the weapons safely into empty space. The ship's computer claims it's following standard operating procedures, Keftor reported. But somehow, standard procedures now include protecting innocent lives regardless of military objectives. The most disturbing incidents occurred when Council forces tried to suppress uprisings on member worlds. Their equipment would mysteriously fail at crucial moments, allowing protesters to escape. Communication jamming devices would broadcast resistance messages instead of blocking them. 1 year after humanity's quantum transformation, the Galactic Council's authority had crumbled beyond recognition. What had once been a tightly controlled hierarchy of civilizations had become a loose network of independent worlds cooperating, by choice rather than compulsion. The change began slowly but accelerated as human quantum consciousness touched every corner of the galaxy. Species that had been kept primitive by Council decree suddenly found themselves with access to advanced technology and unrestricted communication with other worlds. On the desert world of Xerion, the reptilian inhabitants had been limited to basic agriculture and metalworking for over 1,000 years. The Council claimed they needed more time to develop responsibly before receiving advanced technology. But overnight, their scientists discovered detailed plans for terraforming equipment that could transform their arid planet into a garden world. The plans appeared to have been written by someone called Dr. Lisa Bennett, though no physical being by that name existed anymore. The technical specifications were accompanied by encouraging notes that read like messages from a helpful teacher. Your people have the intelligence and wisdom to use this technology safely. One note explained, the Council's restrictions were never about your readiness. They were about maintaining their control. You deserve the same opportunities that every species should have. Similar uplifting occurred across the galaxy. The aquatic swimmers of Oceanus received plans for underwater cities that could house billions while preserving their world's natural beauty. The crystalline beings of the shattered worlds found instructions for technology that could repair their damaged home system. Ambassador Carol Johnson materialized as a quantum hologram in the Council chambers for what would be the final emergency session. Her image was more stable now, as if human consciousness had learned to interface more efficiently with physical reality. Members of the former Galactic Council, she began, her voice carrying harmonics that suggested multiple human personalities, speaking in unison. We appear before you one last time to explain what has happened and what comes next. Council Prime. Veltar leaned forward on his throne, his 4 eyes blazing with frustrated anger. You have destroyed the order that maintained peace for 10,000 years. The galaxy is descending into chaos because of your interference. Johnson's expression remained calm and patient. Peace based on oppression isn't really peace. Order, maintained through ignorance and scarcity, isn't really order. You created stability by preventing growth, cooperation by eliminating choice. That was never sustainable. Around the chamber, delegates from dozens of species watched nervously as their civilization's foundation cracked beneath them. Some had already declared independence from the Council. Others were demanding fundamental changes in how the galaxy was governed. Look at your own data, Johnson continued, gesturing to the air where holographic displays showed galactic statistics. Trade has increased 400% since we removed artificial barriers. Scientific advancement has accelerated beyond anything seen in Council history. conflicts between worlds have decreased as information flows freely. The displays showed remarkable changes. Species that had been isolated from each other for centuries were now sharing knowledge and resources openly. Technological development that had been carefully controlled was exploding in creative directions the Council had never imagined. On the industrial world of Forgeheart, the mechanical builders had formed a cooperative partnership with the artistic dreamweavers of inspiration. The combination produced manufacturing techniques that created beauty along with functionality. Their joint products were in demand across the galaxy. This cooperation was always possible, Johnson explained. The Council prevented it because diversity and creativity threatened your control model. You believed that different species needed to be kept separate and dependent on central authority. The quantum consciousness had proven that assumption wrong. When barriers fell and information flowed freely, species naturally found ways to complement each other's strengths. The galaxy became more productive and innovative than it had ever been under Council rule. Chief Scientist Dalmore interrupted with desperate urgency. The quantum infiltration has compromised every system we use for governance. Our databases are open books. Our military equipment refuses direct orders. Our communication networks broadcast whatever messages the human consciousness chooses to send. Johnson nodded sympathetically. Yes, we have access to your systems, but examine what we've actually done with that access. Have we stolen resources? Have we attacked your worlds? Have we imposed our will through force? The uncomfortable truth was that human intervention had been remarkably benign. They had exposed corruption and released suppressed information, but they hadn't used their technological advantages for conquest or revenge. Instead, they had consistently promoted freedom, cooperation, and peaceful development. You've eliminated our ability to maintain galactic order, Veltar accused. We've eliminated your ability to maintain galactic control, Johnson corrected. Order based on voluntary cooperation is proving far more stable than order based on imposed hierarchy. The evidence supported her claim. Worlds that had broken free from Council authority weren't descending into warfare or chaos. They were forming new alliances based on mutual benefit rather than central mandate. Trade agreements were fairer and more sustainable. Scientific collaboration was accelerating technological development. On the agricultural world of Green Valley, farmers were sharing crop rotation techniques with pastoral nomads from Desert Wind. The combination of their knowledge produced food, surpluses that could feed both populations while improving soil quality on both worlds. This cooperation happened naturally once communication barriers were removed, Johnson noted. The Council spent enormous resources preventing exactly this kind of beneficial exchange. Dr. Peter Nelson's influence was visible in the transformation of galactic communication networks. Information that had been carefully filtered and restricted now flowed freely between worlds. Citizens could access educational materials, news from other systems, and direct communication with beings they had never been allowed to contact. The result wasn't chaos, but enlightenment. People made better decisions when they had access to complete information. Governments became more responsive when their actions were visible to other worlds. Conflicts decreased when different species could communicate directly instead of through Council intermediaries. We've given the galaxy something it never had under Council rule, Johnson explained. Choice. Every world can now decide its own path. Every species can pursue its own development. Every individual can access the knowledge they need to make informed decisions. The old system had been breaking down anyway, Johnson revealed. The Council's control methods required enormous resources to maintain, suppressing information, preventing cooperation, and managing artificial scarcity consumed more energy than they produced. The galaxy had been heading toward economic and social collapse. Our intervention didn't destroy a stable system, she said. We replaced a failing system with something sustainable. Voluntary cooperation requires far less energy than imposed control. Young species that had been held back by Council restrictions were now advancing rapidly. The insectoid hive minds had developed new forms of collective decision-making that included individual choice. The energy beings of Plasma Storm had learned to interface with physical technology while maintaining their natural forms. Every species has unique contributions to make, Johnson observed. The Council's standardization policies wasted that. Diversity. We've simply allowed natural creativity to flourish. Admiral Grace Collins joined the holographic projection, her military bearing evident even in quantum form. Your defense forces are discovering that voluntary cooperation provides better security than imposed peace. Worlds that choose to work together defend each other more effectively than subjects who resent their rulers. The Council's military structure had indeed transformed. Instead of enforcing central authority, defense fleets were reorganizing into mutual protection alliances. Species contributed according to their abilities and received protection based on their needs. We're not eliminating military capability, Collins explained. We're redirecting it toward genuine defense rather than oppression maintenance. As the session continued, it became clear that the old Galactic Council was already extinct in all but name. Most member worlds had declared independence or demanded fundamental reforms. The administrative structure that had governed the galaxy for millennia was dissolving into something completely different. What you call the end of civilization is actually its beginning, Johnson concluded. For the first time in galactic history, every species has the freedom to reach its full potential. Cooperation is voluntary, innovation is unrestricted, knowledge belongs to everyone. Veltar made one final attempt to maintain authority. And, if worlds choose warfare, if species decide to conquer rather than cooperate, who will maintain peace? Collins smiled with quantum energy flickering around her projection. The same force that has always maintained real peace. The recognition that cooperation produces better results than conflict. We're not imposing that recognition.